Welcome to Evilive, the live media commentary show that answers a question: is the size of the sandworm or the way you ride it that matters? Subscribing to the channel because today I'm reviewing Dune Part 2. Part 2. All right. Now, before I dive into this, I feel it is important to address the elephant in the room, and that is that with any adaptation from novel to film, there have to be concessions made, right? The fact that you cannot take 600 to 800 pages of a novel and put that within 2 to 3 hours faithfully. You simply can't. And so you have to make concessions. You have to take an approach as a screenwriter on what is the central core to this property and what am I trying to say through that central core with making the film. So let's set that aside. There has never been an adaptation of a property that is 100% faithful to its original source material. The closest I have ever seen in my life is Rosemary's Baby, and it was brilliant. But I think it was because the director didn't actually know you could change the source material. I think that's actually what it was, the inexperience of the director that made that 100%, like a 99.9% faithful adaptation of the source material. Again, it was brilliant. But what I quickly realized once I did my first review of Dune Part 1 was that people have, and I should have known, people have an emotional attachment to IPs that supersedes rational thought. And this is, I'm trying to be fair here. People get fanatical about their fandoms. And if it is not replicated perfectly in their version of whatever that fandom is, then it is either a wholesale loss and a failure, or you can appreciate parts of it, or you can throw away other parts, or you just disregard the thing altogether. It's almost always a black or white situation. And so when I approached the first Dune film without having read the novel, without understanding the fandom, without understanding the core scope, the vast scope of all of the author, their work, Herbert's work, just isolating it on what I knew of the property from my own personal experience in the first half is brilliant. I gave it 5 out of 5 Evil Eyes. I love that version of Dune Part 1. I love Dune, the first half of the Dune novel. I think it's great. And arguably Dune Part 1 is actually 3/4 of the novel. Because Frank Herbert, and I know this is going to hurt some people's feelings, is not a good author. He's a brilliant world builder, but he is not a good storyteller. He skips through time, jumps forward in time at ridiculous points for no reason at all. He is not very good at describing events in any way at all. He tries to take a mythological and metaphorical approach to storytelling, which I can't fault him for because I like that too. But he's not that good at it. The thing is he's one of the first to do it in the way that he did with Dune. And so everyone heralds it as this beautiful treatment of the human condition and his sort of reimagining of the hero's journey, because he didn't like the idea of the hero's journey. He thought it was detrimental to humankind. And so he created the anti-hero's journey with Paul Atreides into this Masonic figure, the sort of Messiah. And that's what Dune is all about. And so if you come into it understanding that he's not the best writer, and any adaptation is not going to be faithful to his writing because you can't, because it's just not that good, you have to fill in gaps, then you might understand where Dune Part 2 comes into play with the whole Dune franchise. Because the majority of stuff that happens in Dune Part 2, the film, did not happen in the book. The whole war, that was skipped over. It happened in reference to a time jump, but you didn't actually see details. There's no detail. The biggest fault with Frank Herbert is his lack of detail. Great world building. Genuinely good. I really, really loved that. But he's not a good storyteller. If you accept that, or even if you don't, I don't give a fuck. If you accept the idea that he is fallible, he's not infallible, then maybe we can have a conversation about what this film actually was. And I have to lead with that because I liked this a lot. I like Dune a lot, but I am at least honest about the author's realities of skill, talent, and failings. And most people who fervently love Dune are not. They pretend like he's infinitely better, or this is infinitely more complex of a story. And I don't see the complexity that everyone talks about. Have you ever read George R. R. Martin? Have you ever read any political dramas, any period fictions, our own histories? Because Dune itself is not that complex. It has political, religio, social machinations, but so does life. And so everyone who always has said, and this is like a pervasive comment that is always made, you can never make Dune into a film because it's too complex, is clearly not actually using their fucking brains. Because Dune is not complex. You have different factions warring for one MacGuffin. That's it. That's the totality of Dune. The Spice Guild, the Space Guild. People are going to forget about that. The Space Guild, the Bene Gesserits, all the different great houses, the Emperor himself. Everything is wrapped up around the idea of communicating with outside space and controlling that. That's it. That's all it has to do with anything. And so the Bene Gesserits are trying to create a Masonic figure. The Emperor and all the great houses are trying to vie for power. The Space Guild needs the spice in order to do their goddamn jobs, because in this world, there is no actual technology. It's all biological technology. But it's not complex. It's no more complex than your average high school girl fucking fight. Your mean girl social structure. That's as complex as it gets. So I don't understand why people build something up into something that is truly not. And I know this is what they always say, and I've seen it in my comments, so I know for a fact. They say, well, you just don't understand the complexity. Really? Or maybe you're just making a mountain out of a molehill in order to make yourself feel special or important or somehow more intelligent than someone else, when the reality is you can distill Dune down to Mean Girls. And that's it. So let's not overinflate what this actually is. This is a sci-fi story about a family who does not toe the line and an emperor and a galaxy who does not want someone in a position of power that doesn't toe the line, and a religious organization that is trying to create a Masonic figure, a Jesus figure. That's it. That's the whole complexity of everything. And it's all wrapped around this one world of Arrakis Dune. Okay, so all the preamble is done. That being said, my initial impressions of this are, I liked the first one better. It changed a lot of the source material, and it added, like, the majority of the movie is not source material. The events are, but again, Frank Herbert skipped over battles so that he didn't have to deal with actually describing anything. And you wonder why details and visuals differ so much between adaptations, between the TV adaptations or the films, or the film and the development film that preceded this. It's because he lacked detail. He didn't specify any detail at all. That is that tells you everything you need to know about a storyteller, whether they're good or not, and whether they can provide detail. And he didn't. What's amazing about the lasting influence of Dune is that in the vacuum of detail, we're still interested because it tells a human story about human experience. And that's the greatness of this. And so watching this in the theater, I wanted to like it infinitely more than I actually liked it, but I did truly like it. So initial impressions are good, but not as good as I expected it to be, especially with the reviews people are giving it. Like, I thought this was going to be like Empire Strikes Back, and I would rather watch Empire Strikes Back, though I do love this film. Okay, that being said, let's talk about the reviews. So IMDb gives it 9 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes has it sitting at 94% certified fresh, 95% audience score. Metacritic has it 79%. It was directed by Denis Villeneuve, and the screenplay is by Denis Villeneuve and John Spates. It's based on Frank Herbert's Dune novel and the last fourth of that novel, if you want to be specific. The strength of this property, of Dune as a 2-part film treatment and eventually a 3-part, is Denis Villeneuve's passion for the source material and his vision for science fiction, not Frank Herbert's. It's different. And that's why all the changes that Denis makes make actual sense, though I don't think they're necessary. But when you understand the approach that Denis is taking, then you can understand his choices. Cinematography is brilliant as always, and I don't know how much of this we should just chalk up to setting, because our planet is goddamn gorgeous no matter where you go, but there's something genuinely mystical about deserts, and this is filmed on location, and so it's beautiful, and that the setting itself presents a sort of scope that you cannot get in a green screen or in a vacuum or in a volume setting. Like, you have to be in position. And that's another reason why this is so great, is because it's practical as much as it is practical. It is practically practical in its filming. And I love that. I hate more than anything CGI for CGI's sake and CGI for looking fake. And Denis does a great job with his direction. The cinematography does a great job. The 3D effects do a great job of presenting these truly fictional creatures and locations and settings in a very realistic way that's believable visually. It doesn't scream out, oh, that's 3D, you know? And so you sort of compare and contrast, like, maybe the most egregious is the Phantom Menace. It's like pure CGI hell compared with this. And you're just like, that is a beautiful piece of storytelling. And the Phantom Menace was clearly 3D CGI. I mean, it was sort of, you know, spearheading some technology, but still, this is infinitely better. So Grieg Fraser did an amazing job with framing and pulling off some of these scenes in his cinematography work. And Hans Zimmer, the first was better. The first film was infinitely better with the diversity and scope of his music work. This was good, and Hans Zimmer is always good, but it's not great. The first one was great. This one felt more subdued than the first soundtrack. And I was constantly thinking as I was watching this in the theater, thinking, when is it going to pick me up? When is it going to take me away? I don't know if familiarity is the problem that with this part 2, whereas part 1, I had none. And so his music just sort of was of this epic scope that just sort of transported me to Arrakis. This one didn't so much, and it stood out to me. Surprisingly, because I love Hans Zimmer's work. I mean, I think one of his masterpieces is Man of Steel. It just transports me immediately. And Dune Part 1 transported me immediately. This was reductive, and it just didn't have the scope, even though the scenes that we were watching should have had that scope. And I don't know why. I'm still trying to process why. I don't fully understand it. So this was released March 1st, 2024, this past weekend. The budget was about $190 million, which as far as budgets go is not as big as most, but it's still pretty big. I think you saw where it went in quality, because Denis really put together a brilliant film, and I feel like he put the money where it needed to be, and he didn't He didn't just try to put something out flashy and, like we see a lot in like superhero films and stuff. I mean, this felt grounded in the presentation and earned. It didn't feel like it was doing a visual masterpiece for the sake of it, like you see in Avatar, for example. That is a visual masterpiece, not so much in story if we strip it down to what it actually is. Avatar, James Cameron does certain things well. Avatar, I feel like he's hit a wall. And I don't understand why people freak out so much, because it's clearly a visual spectacle, not a storytelling spectacle. And I go to the theater for story. And that's arguably also why I probably resonated more with this version than with Frank Herbert's version of this part of Dune the novel, because it did focus on and structure a story where Frank Herbert was trying to world build and not so much story build. And there is the elements within his novel, which is what Denis pulled out of it and really structured into something solid and strong. But I think that speaks to the failure, again, of Frank Herbert. So far this opening weekend, it's 74.6 million as of me recording this, which is nothing to sneeze at. I'm hoping that it does infinitely better. That's great for an opening weekend. This deserves more. And I think this deserves more not because of the source material, Frank Herbert's novel. I think this deserves more because of Denis Villeneuve, because of what he brings to it. He brings a vision to a story that is wholly his own. And yes, he has people working with him that are helping him shape and carve out and, finalize this and stuff. But this is him. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay, so that being said, let's get into the story. Everyone knows there's so many reviews out about this already that the story itself, it's out there. Everyone knows it. So the first half of Dune Part 1, which again is like 3/4 of the first novel because of time jumps and stuff, is Paul Atreides traveling to Arrakis with his father and family. And because the Emperor is wanting to set the family up for a fall and get rid of them because they are not sort of falling in line with the Emperor. And in this film, in Part 2, they say it's because they didn't, they were too independent and free thinking. They weren't like lockstep like the Harkonnens were, or Harkonnens. But it's it's so ridiculous because if you're here's the problem, and it's all encapsulated in my first review of the novel and also in this film, at the very end of this film, well, the third act anyway, where the Emperor is talking to the Harkonnens' leadership, Baron Harkonnen, and he's like, "There's a whole southern half of this planet that you have been in control of forever. And then we sent the Atreides over here to be in control of it. And then you tried to take control over to get rid of the Atreides. You never thought to look at the southern hemisphere of this planet? Your job is to look at the planet and control the planet. And you only did any intelligence onto the northern hemisphere? It's the most ridiculous thing anyone could possibly do. Well, and this is his explanation. It's well known. No one lives in the southern hemisphere, blah, 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 blah. Except that all of the fucking Fremen live in the southern hemisphere. All of them. It's only the freedom fighters that live in the northern hemisphere. And you didn't know that? You didn't decide to send any intel in there? You don't have satellites covering the entire planet like we do Earth to look at the different parts of the goddamn planet to tell where the freedom fucking fighters are, you feckless fucking ruler? And how, as the Emperor of the known galaxy, how do you not have someone in position of authority over the most important planet in the galaxy? The most important. They don't even know the whole planet and you let them rule? It's the most worthless, pathetic, disgusting excuse for any type of leadership I've ever heard anywhere ever, full stop. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. Oh yeah, I'm going to give you control of a planet, but it's okay if you only look at the top half. Who cares about the second half? Look at Earth. Look at the northern hemisphere of Earth and look at the southern hemisphere of Earth. Which do you think is more populated? During the vast scope of human experience, which fucking hemisphere do you think is more populated? It is the southern hemisphere. That is where humanity came from. Of course, because it's the warmest historically. It's the most, it doesn't have an ice age covering it in fucking glaciers. Of course the southern hemisphere is, and that's what this is based on. This is all based on, yes, humans leaving Earth and populating the galaxy and everything. But of course there's a human element. This is all based on fucking, Saudi Arabian or fucking, just fucking Arabian culture. This is not made up whole cloth. He clearly stole from human cultures, except he didn't use his fucking brain in order to excuse his poor story making. He just said, they don't look in the south because there's a storm around the center of it. And what technology can go through a storm? Really? It's just fucking worst storytelling ever. It's so fucking stupid and pathetic. Okay, so the Emperor puts in place the most feckless house, the Harkonnens, in control of Arrakis. He believes and listens to these religious zealots who are trying to make a fucking messiah. And here's the other part of that. This is actually making me hate this entire IP. Did no one learn anything about religion? Religion is 100% made up. 100% made up. Every single word of it is written by humans for one reason: to control other humans. That's it. That's the whole purpose of religion. So you're telling me that I have to believe that future generations of humans who have lived all this already are going to fall into the same goddamn tropes of believing bullshit that religious orders tell them? No. There's a reason why the vast majority of all other sci-fi properties say they get rid of religion, because it is so obviously fake and made up. Why would anyone believe it with any ounce of intelligence? That's the reality of human existence. But instead, in Frank Herbert's universe, everyone just forgets about their past, and they're like, oh no, there's definitely a Messiah, and he is coming, and he is going to save us, as the prophecies say, and this is the new Orange Bible, and get the fuck out of here. The reason why science fiction works is because we escape our current tropes, not because we fall into them again. Okay, getting past Frank Herbert's shit writing, let's focus on the actual story. So in part 2, we pick up right after part 1, where Paul Atreides and his mother, Jessica, are going over with the Fremen to sort of become Fremen, to sort of ingratiate them in their culture for safety and security. Because clearly the Harkonnens are not done trying to find every single Atreides to kill. I'm not going to get into the differences between the novel and the film, because we've already gone over the fact that you cannot adapt a novel 100% faithfully. And Denis Villeneuve went in this intentionally, focusing instead of on the grand world building that Frank Herbert was great at, but instead on the isolated reality of Paul as a character and his trajectory as the character arc. And here's the ironic part of it, is that this was all written by Frank Herbert in order to sort of deconstruct and create an anti-version of the hero's journey. But in doing so, he creates the perfect hero's journey. I know he ends it on a position of genocide, but that's kind of how everything ends anyway in the human experience. So I dug that part of it. I thought it was really kind of apropos, as it were. So my biggest complaint in this film is the dynamic between Jessica and Paul. And I know I said I wasn't going to compare it too much with the novel, but in the novel, Paul Atreides knows, my interpretation of the novel anyway, when I read it, Paul knows that he has to become this Messiah. He knows it. He doesn't like the idea of it, and so he tries to find the least egregious version of his actions in order to have the most minimal impact on life. And I like that aspect of his character. And he's supported by his mother in the actual novel. In the film, not so much. His mother is wildly separate from him in the film, and it felt weird. It was like it was like a different character. And I know their excuse is going to be, well, she became a Reverend Mother, and so she's trying to fulfill the prophecy. But she went against the prophecy by making Paul. She went against the Bene Gesserit culture and faith in order to create her son, because she wanted her son to be the one. And so why is she focusing so much? And I get cerebrally why, because she's trying to convince the Fremen to follow him, but she didn't need to do that in the novel. And so I don't understand why, at least my interpretation of it, I don't understand why she's so distant to Paul in this, and why he is so anti his reality when, like, they knew they were Harkonnens when they were first assaulted. They were sort of sitting in the desert under the tent in hiding from that first assault in number 1, Dune Part 1. That's in the novel what they realized that they were Harkonnens. In this, they don't come to terms until after Paul takes the worm bile, the water of life, which doesn't make any sense. Like, at this point, the mother had already done that. She should fucking know. And she said, well, I knew once I did it. Okay, well, why didn't you fucking say something? Why didn't you fucking say something? Because you don't think that has some bearing on this conflict? That might have some leverage in ending the conflict? It's bad storytelling is what it is. It's taking knowledge that could change the outcome and ignoring it so that you could realize an outcome that you already subverted. And it's frustrating because there should be logic to characters' choices. Another complaint I have about this is Josh Brolin's character, Gurney Halleck. He in the original novel, he was I know I said I was going to compare it, but how can you not? In some instances, I'm going to try my best not to. I love the character. I love how he's portrayed on film. It's not that much more divergent, except it's much more retribution focused, which I dig. When you strip this away, I'm sort of like taking a step back here. When you strip this away, this is a revenge story. It is the Atreides were destroyed, and Paul is coming back to seek revenge against the Harkonnens. And that's what he does. That's the base element of the story. There's so much more wrapped up into it. And this is actually the strength of Frank Herbert, is that he goes into this world building aspect of it and creates all these different dynamics that can play out social and political and religious avenues. But Gurney Halleck as a character was great because he thought that Jessica turned against her husband and was like assassinated him. And he was then going to go kill her and her son. And then he realized that they were alive and that they didn't assassinate him and that they were pawns and that he had been a pawn. That was the beautiful moment of his character when he came back ready to murder Jessica, and Paul stepped in and he's like, no, you have this misunderstood. They assassinated us and they turned you against us. Are you going to do their work? And he's like, oh, fuck. And he has this sort of come to, Paul moment and it was beautiful. And I shed a tear in the novel in the moment because it was so wonderfully crafted by Frank Herbert, which was, to his credit, one of his best scenes he's ever written. In the movie, he's just a mercenary doing spice. He's a pirate collecting spice. And then he sees Paul because the Fremen attack him for collecting spice as they attack the Harkonnens who are trying to do the same. And he just sees him and he's like, oh, hey, what's up, dude? He's like, oh, you're alive. This is dope. Hey, how about we kill these Harkonnen bitches? Like it was like no emotional resonance at all. It was hollow. And it upset me because the novel had such prescience in that moment. And the film was just surface level bullshit. It kind of bugged me. Clearly it bugged me. And then there's Chani dynamic with Paul. In the movie, Paul is doing his best to sort of ingratiate himself with the Fremen. Not because he has this grand scheme of getting back with the Fremen against them, but because he's just finding himself in another culture. Fuck off. That's not at all the character. At all. The whole setup of the character is him and his father at the beginning of part 1 saying, you don't choose your destiny, you step up to it. And then him coming into the Fremen pretending like he doesn't want it. And this is the biggest character diversion of Paul Atreides for me. In the novel, Paul knew he was the Messiah. He knew he had to do what he didn't want to do, and so he tried his best to avoid it and find the least oppressive path. In the film, he just refused it. He was like, I'm not your Messiah. I'm definitely not it. Up until the point where he actually was. And he was like, okay, now I am. Well, pick a lane, dude. Like, what are you doing? You either are or you aren't, but you can't pretend that you're not, and then at the fucking 12th hour say, all right, fuck it, give me the water of life, I'm going to do it. It creates for a hollow journey. It creates for this vacuum of emotion that I did not feel in the film, but I felt in the novel. And yes, there are inevitable choices that have to be made, but still. And so he adopts his role as the Messiah. They have their war against the Harkonnens and ultimately against the Emperor, which in the novel was washed over. Because, again, Frank Herbert's not very good at actually writing detail and character interaction and stuff. But, like, how can you focus the majority of your movie on something that was skipped over in the novel? Like, that's my complaints. Like, he approached this novel, Denis, as a war movie. And there were some pretty good battle sequences and stuff. But it fell flat because that's not the story of Dune. That's not the point. The war isn't the point. The character arc, the political drama is the point. And so I came into this review saying, I'm going to start this off by saying, the fans are fanatical about Dune, but they're fanatical for different reasons. Each fan for any great IP loves the IP for different reasons. If you happen to love Dune IP for the war aspect of it, then you're going to love this. If you don't know anything about this IP, then it's not going to matter. If you love the IP because of the world building aspect of it, then you're probably going to be left a little hollow because there's not a lot of world building with this. It references the great houses, but it doesn't reference the Spacing Guild, which the Spice is fucking wholly wrapped up in. It references the Bene Gesserit's goal of creating the Messiah and manipulating the Emperor and the great houses in order to manifest various versions of the Messiah, depending on which one pans out. They have contingency plan A, B, C, D, and E, and probably all the way to Z, which is dope. But it doesn't really nail down the strength, in my opinion, of Dune. Because what I loved about the IP is the complexity of what the Bene Gesserits are capable of tapping into. And again, everyone's different. And so your version of this is going to differ from mine, and I'm okay with that. Everyone has different perspectives. That's what makes life great. And that's what makes reviews great, is that everyone differs slightly or greatly. What I loved about Dune and the journey of Paul Atreides and his mother, especially his mother and Paul's sister, Jessica's daughter, is that she was not supposed to do what she did. She went as a rogue, as a renegade, Bene Gesserit, in order to make Paul a man. She was not supposed to. So once she did, and she taught him how to be a Bene Gesserit, which she was not supposed to do, because she wanted to have the Messiah as her son. This is all ego, 100% ego. Everything she did was to glorify herself through her son. But as soon as you take that water of life, you tap into everyone and everything from the beginning, because it's all tied up in DNA. All of our DNA speaks to us from everyone, from who we are now to everyone that came before you. And that allows you the gift of prescience so that you can see potential futures based on the actions of those who preceded you. Women, who are the only ones who have ever been able to survive drinking the water of life and having any sort of power at all in the Bene Gesserit society, is because life, human life, the default is women. And men have never been able to, primarily because they've never wanted to allow men to. And so you knew the Messiah was going to come because it would be the first man to be able to drink the water of life and have all of the connections with the DNA, all the history and stuff. I take this and I sort of spin it out in this idea that, well, if all life is by default female, which human life is, it takes an extra chromosome activated to make a man. And only women who take this water of life can tap into all of their ancestors' knowledge and pain and wisdom and bring it forward and see into the future because of it. And that's where they get all their power from. And the first man to do that, and women cannot tap into men because they don't have that chromosome. They've never had it activated. That's why they don't have access and they can't be the Messiah themselves. Only a man can, because they not only have access to all the feminine, because men start as women, it takes a chromosome, an extra chromosome activated to make a man. So they have all the access to women knowledge, but now they suddenly have access to male knowledge too. And that's what makes them more powerful. They don't just have access to half of the human experience, they have access to all of it. And so their visions are clearer. They're able to do things that are greater because they have a full access to humanity and all of human existence. I love that aspect of the storytelling. It's not hammered home the way I am hammering it. I don't know if other people see it the same way as I do, but I love that aspect of it. It made it so much better because it's not just about this religious prophecy. It's not just about the machinations of mankind. It's about the limitation of gender accessibility to the DNA of mankind. And that creates a level of complexity that supersedes everything on the page. Everything. It's brilliant. It's not saying that men are better than women or women are better than men. It's just saying that Paul has access to greater resources than Jessica or the other great mothers do. And that's dope as fuck. That's why they fear the Messiah. That's why they've been trying to make the Messiah. And if Jessica comes along and makes one that proves to be true in Paul, that upsets the entire fucking universe. That's amazing. That's what I got out of Dune, the novel. And that's what I liked about Dune, the film, part 2, but they didn't play into that at all. Like the novel tiptoes into it. The film never even touched on the impact of why. Why is Paul better than Jessica? Why is Paul better than the other great mothers? The other Bene Gesserits? Wholehearted. What makes him better? Because he's the prophesied one? Why? Why is he the prophesied one? It's because he's the first man to do it. Because he's the first renegade creation of the Bene Gesserits to be able to do it. They don't even touch on it. The fact that they don't even touch on the Spacing Guild, which is the whole point of the spice. They suggest it in the first part, but they don't even touch on it in the second. That's the whole point. It's the fact that humanity has let go of technology that brings the import of this spice. Because it allows us to travel through space-time and communicate amongst civilizations. That's it. That's the totality of it. They don't even address it. It's all just like this weird political Game of Thrones thing, which is so much more than that. And so I feel like it was a lost opportunity of Denis to really dive in. And here's the worst part about all of this, is everyone's like, oh, how could a sci-fi film ever make money? There's not a great audience for sci-fi. There is a great audience for sci-fi. There's a great audience for adult sci-fi. Stop second-guessing the intellect of the world population. We can take heavy storytelling and we will reward it with our tax dollars. 100%. We will show up in the theaters, but stop pulling punches. Stop telling us that we're not smart enough to understand a 1960s idea of a universe. When everything in our culture is way beyond 1960s thinking. Stop pretending like Frank Herbert created something that no one can properly understand. It's so complex. No, it's a fucking sci-fi story with religio-socio-political machinations. That's it. Stop pretending it's something greater than it is, because the second you stop pretending that it's something that it's not, is the second you can realize that you can actually tell the totality of the story. Whether it's in 2 or 3 films, you can tell the story. You don't have to take out aspects like the fucking Spacing Guild, because that's the whole point of fucking Arrakis. That's the point of the whole story. That's the point of the universe that he built. That's the strength of it. That's why at the very end of Dune Part 2, when he says, I'm going to nuke the spice. So all the other great houses got to step the fuck back. In the novel, it's the Spacing Guild that tells everyone to step back because they need the spice, because they're not operating on some weird socio-political religious understanding. They're operating on a survival understanding. These different cultures cannot exist on their own planets throughout the galaxy without interaction amongst each other. Everything falls apart without the spice. But it's never even broached as a topic in Part 2. It's just like, hey, we have the spice and the families don't want us to destroy it. Why? Why don't they want you to destroy it? Give me the fucking grounded impact of why it's important. And I will tune in for it. And everyone else will too. It is not complex. Girls are arguably the most vicious fucking creatures on the human planet. The complexity of their high school dynamic social relationships is something that the vast majority of humans can never understand, even other girls. It is mind-bogglingly complex and stupid and irrational. That is Dune. Stupid and irrational. We can get it if you just sell it. People build this stuff up as if it's something so much bigger than it actually is, and it blows my fucking mind. So ultimately, Chani Denis creates a version of the Fremen where there are fanatics that believe the Bene Gesserit seeded belief, religious stories about a messiah, and the other faction that is just trying to survive on this destroyed planet and fight back against the people that destroyed it. That's really all it comes down to. Chani is on the side of the realists. Jessica is trying to seed the message of the Messiah through her son, Paul. And it all ends in Paul coming to the realization that he is the Messiah. It never addresses that he was fundamentally created by Jessica and the Harkonnens and the Bene Gesserits. Like, he's the grandson of the Harkonnens, Baron, Vlad. But like Vladimir, I don't know. I feel like there's some more gravity that could have been impressed there that wasn't. I'm not so much bothered by Aaliyah's absence in this, even though in the novel she was a huge part of it because of time jumps. Again, it took longer for Paul to sink his way into the Fremen in the novel than it did in the film, which is a little unrealistic, I guess. But it's okay. I didn't mind the time jumps in the film. I understand that the film has to truncate story points. But when you start to realize why Denis made the choices that he made, it suddenly starts to make sense. And I know people are like worried, like super Dune fans are like worried about how he's going to make that third film, which is the film version of Dune Messiah. But Denis went into this knowing that he wanted to make a Dune Messiah. So he wrote this script with the intention of writing Dune Messiah. So every choice he made, as strange and obscure as it might seem, is leading to intentional choices for that third film. Whether it gets made or not, it was all intentional. It's not a mistake. He's not going to have to bumble through the script with the choices he made in this. This was 100% intentional on his part. And I like that. I like a storyteller who has a vision, who wants to tell that vision. And that's another reason why I can forgive the changes that he made from the novel to the actual film, and why I'm okay. For the most part, when I was watching it, I was okay with the choices because it was entertaining. It was a visual spectacle. I bought into the rationale, even though it was different. And I see every adaptation as an interpretation. And I see Frank Herbert's story with all of its flaws and all of its glory. And I do think it's glorious. I know I'm critical, but I do genuinely love it. I see Denis Villeneuve's vision of the story and his choices in order to make a more compelling hero's journey, which is ironic because Frank Herbert was trying to make an anti-hero's journey. And the fact that we as an audience are still cheering on at the very end of this. We are cheering on a jihad, a holy war, an Islamic human cultural holy war. we, a Western audience, I want to let this sink in for a second. We, as a Western audience who celebrates individualism above all else, are celebrating and championing and hoping for a religious jihad. How subversive is that in storytelling? How great is that? That he has a Western audience pumping their fist like every single religious Saudi Arabian or Middle Eastern crazy Arabian culture, Islamic culture, shouting for the death of cultures because they dare draw a picture of their God or their prophet, or they dare speak negatively about their prophet. We're doing the exact same thing in the theater. Oh, the irony. It's beautiful. Okay, so we know the story. Paul gets his revenge against the Harkonnens and the Emperor for him turning on them. He gets his revenge against the Bene Gesserits with his mother through their subversion, drinking of the water of life and becoming the Messiah. In the film, he's reluctant and he doesn't want to do it. In the novel, he understands he has to do it, but he's trying to find the least oppressive way of doing it. So Villeneuve and Game of Thrones language creator David Peterson created the Chakobsa language, which was used on the actors on set. It felt really reductive. It didn't feel like a new language. It felt like a made-up bullshit language when I was listening to it, which bothered me. When I was listening to, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. When I was watching Game of Thrones and you had the Horsemen's culture and their language, it's been a long time. I don't remember their fucking name. I believed it. It was 100%. That's the language. Listening to this, it fucking felt made up. It felt really made up. So blah, 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 blah. Like, all right, you're okay. I didn't believe it for a second. It felt so manufactured and fucked up. I don't know if it's because I've watched too many films with fake language in it. I don't know why I didn't resonate with it, but I just didn't, and it bothered me. There is, of course, plans for a third film as well as a television spin-off series. The television spin-off series is called Dune Prophecy. The third film is based on Dune Messiah, but it'll probably be called Dune Part 3 because no one knows what the fuck Dune Messiah is. Because only fucking super nerds read Dune Messiah. Let's be honest. Denis wrote the film script with that accounted for his future plans regarding Dune Messiah, such as by modifying Chani's character from the book. He intentionally modified Chani's character so that he could tell his version of Dune Messiah. It was not a mistake. It's not a lack of planning. He has planned it. That's what I love about Denis Villeneuve. He is a brilliant storyteller with a vision. You may not always resonate with the vision, but you cannot argue with his vision, that he has one and that he sees it through. And it's brilliant all the time. Whether you like it or not, you have to accept that it's brilliant because it is. So you may not like the changes, but you have to respect the fucking vision, man. This is a storyteller that is way beyond most other storytellers in Hollywood. Way beyond. And he's great. So I'm stoked. I hope there's a Dune Messiah. I hope there's a Dune Part 3 because I will love it. I'm being critical about this film, and I'm being critical about Frank Herbert's Dune. I loved Dune as a novel. I love the original Dune film. I love Dune Part 1, and I love Dune Part 2. It is okay to be critical about a property and an IP that you love and still love it. I know in our world that seems to be antithetical and a misnomer, but it's true. You can be critical and still love something. And for those of you who just turn this off because you can't handle someone being critical, well, fuck off. That's your choice. I choose to live in a world that's not black and white, that is very much made of grays, and we can have opinions. So the third film would serve as a conclusion of the trilogy. And of course, there's a shit ton of more novels. Not as many as you might think, but there's a bunch of other novels for Dune that Frank Herbert wrote, and then his son decided to try to capitalize on and make his own versions of, which I heard are terrible, but I don't know because I haven't read. Hans Zimmer revealed that he already has started writing music for the third film after Villeneuve came in and wordlessly put down Dune Messiah on his desk. So that puts a fucking warmth in my heart. I can't wait for that. So that tells me that not only is the score being written, because it is, the script is being written, because it is. It's not finalized yet, but it's being written. And Villeneuve has had a plan from the beginning. And I love that. So many IPs have taken a nosedive because there hasn't been a plan from the beginning. I love that Denis has a plan. And I may not agree with every single choice, but I don't care. I'm still here for it. I'm still going to pay for it. I will give you my money. Just put it on the screen and I will pay you for it. That's how I feel. I love science fiction. I love this IP. I love these films. I love the novels. But I can still just complain and bitch and moan because I genuinely feel like the choices that were made in this film and the previous film, Dune Part 1 and 2, shortcutted the potential audience's understanding. It's not that complex. We get it. We can get it. Give us a chance. So, I mean, this is what it comes down to. What I liked about this. I loved the grand scope of everything. I felt like everything was rushed though, man. I felt like it was a little bit hollow, and I don't fully understand why. I'm a day and a half after I've seen it in the theater, and I don't understand why I'm feeling the way I am. It was not as good as I wanted it to be. The actors all did great. The visuals were amazing. The sound was okay. You know, it wasn't as good as the first. I knew the story. I knew how it was going to end. I liked the choices that they made in order to excuse why he went into it the way he did, because he wanted to focus on Paul Atreides and not the universe that Frank Herbert built. He wanted to focus on his journey. And that's why he made the choices he did about everything from Aaliyah to side characters to the Bene Gesserits. I mean, he just hyper-focused on Paul's story. And you can make a fair argument that the first two novels of Frank Herbert's 6 or 8 novels of Dune, not including his sons, but Frank's, were about the hero's journey and ending it as fast as possible so he could get on to another story. And I think it's ironic that Frank Herbert was rushing his way through Paul's story so he could focus on a greater universal story. And the films are solely focused on the hero, Paul, as a hero, as a maniacal hero. And we all ate it like he is a good person. But what you seem to fail to understand after watching this is that he is leading the Fremen to a genocide, to a holy war, something that we have fought against in Western society for generations, and we're celebrating it. It's just, I can't not see the irony in that. I cannot ignore that. So my experience with the film is that I enjoyed it. I really appreciated the choices made, and I understand why they were made. I didn't have any particular closeness, intimacy with the original source material. So I don't know why I feel the way I do, except that I genuinely feel like the choices made to keep other elements out was because they didn't trust the audience, that they would be along for the ride. And I think that we are a sophisticated species that we could handle your Mean Girls high school culture that Dune is fucking the premise of. We get it. And we can definitely fucking go along for the ride. And I'm tired of people trying to build up this fucking IP as being something that it's not. And being so much more complex than it actually is. Let's just accept it for what it is. It's great. It's not perfect. It's got huge flaws, but it's great. Let's celebrate that and let's explore it more. And don't pull punches. I don't know, man. When the 3 Dune worms were coming in to the Emperor's little compound on Arrakis when Paul called him in. It felt a little hollow to me. It didn't have the impact that I wanted it to have. For example, and I know people are going to fucking try to reduce this by this statement. In Empire Strikes Back, because it's being compared to Empire, when the AT-ATs are put down on Hoth and they're assaulting the rebel base, that felt really fucking heavy. Like they were doing their damnedest to survive, not just to survive to fight off the Empire. They knew they were fucked, but to survive to escape. That was the point. They weren't trying to fight them off and live there. They were trying to fight them off so they could get the fuck out of Dodge. You felt the gravity in that. In this, those worms come in and dudes are like staring at the worms. A couple of them run. Everyone should be running. You're facing death. And they're just like, man, you can make the fucking, oh, they're Sardaukars, so they're trained to stand and fight. No one stand to fight against the fucking sandworms. No one even fucking knows about them unless you know anything about Arrakis, which most people don't even know. The Harkonnens clearly don't even fucking know it because they ignore the second half of the fucking hemisphere of the goddamn planet. So, like, I didn't feel the fucking weight of that assault. It should have been what everyone has been making comparisons to. It should have been that second Lord of the Rings film where they're assaulting Helm's Deep or some shit. I didn't have that gravity. It felt like a visual spectacle, which was beautiful. I thought that. But like, I don't know. I don't know. So maybe it's not for me. Maybe I like aspects of Dune that Denis Villeneuve doesn't like and didn't want to put on screen. Maybe the part of Dune that I love is not the part that anyone else loves. And I can accept that. And I can be okay with that. But it did not land for me like it did for everyone else. I've already spoken to what I don't like, so I won't go into that. So my rating of Dune Part 2, it's still good. My out-of-theater reaction was 5 out of 5 Evilives. After considering the film and thinking about it for a day and a half, I'm giving it 4 out of 5 Evil Eyes. It's not as good as the first film because it adds stuff that wasn't detailed out in the novel, and so it's new to me. It ignored stuff that was detailed out in the novel, which I felt fell a little flat, and it didn't include stuff that I think is prescient to what makes Dune Dune because it didn't trust the audience to understand it. And that is a flaw in filmmaking. And for that, I subtracted 1 evil eye, but god damn it, it's still a good show. It's still a good film. Watch it. It's worth your money. It's 100% worth your money. So that's how I feel about Dune. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there. Drink a little water of life and be evil.